Hey, so yeah, please just excuse my camera quality. I only got the time to do this very late at night. So yeah, just to start it off, I think it would be best to have the question in front of you, question 10 and 11, because those two go together. And then also this recording side by side. Okay, so first things first, question 10 talks about dividends, right? The first thing that we know is that when we look at dividends, we're looking at shares, right? In order to calculate dividends at all times, we're looking at shares. So it tells us interim dividends was paid and declared. Well, same thing as them saying declared and paid. So that one we don't need to worry about. We don't do anything with that one. It's fine. Now, final dividend of 10 cents per share was declared. What we know about final dividend is that it happens at the end of the year. So now that they didn't specify on which date, um, we're gonna say that it happens at the end of the year after all the share movements, specifically all these share movements, right? So I just did a rough draft of the ordinary share capital that is given to you in the answer booklet thingy, and then here it is, right? So far we know that they issued shares at the beginning of the year at that much. I'm just gonna draw a line there. It's gonna impede there, but okay. And all that we know that they issued shares. It also says so here. So here is the paragraph. 230,000 new shares was issued on 1 December 2022 at 5 rand a share, and then on 1 March 2023 32,000 shares were repurchased at 7 rand 10 cents a share. The company did not have the cash for the buyback, but it was seen as a strategic important move, a loan, blah blah blah. So you remember when I told you about shares and buying them back and the significance of that, of boosting shareholders, similar to having clothes, I mean not clothes, shoes in the limited shoes, right? So the more shoes that are out there, the less expensive your shoes become, right? If everyone has this specific pair of shoes, let me use what's a common shoe that's out there? Okay, let me use a watch. I can't think about shoes. There's nothing that comes to mind. A watch, right? Actually, yeah, shoes. Sorry, shoes are there. I have something. Sorry. Air Jordan ones, right? They are not that common. Okay, Air Forces, they're common, but they're expensive for their own reason, right? They go around 1.4 thousand, somewhere there, right? Now, Air Force Ones, you can find them in any shop. Go to Mainlane, go to Midrand, go to Cape Town, go to another country, you can find them there. Then you have on the other side of the spectrum, Air Jordan ones, the Dio edition or the Eminem edition, or all those friends and family editions. Those are things that you would find maybe in a specific store in America, or at the Nike factory, Nike museum, wherever. So those type of shoes are more expensive because there is a limited number of them. Same thing with the shares, right? The reason why they repurchase the shares is so that they can bring the value of their shares higher, right? So you remember in your assignment you did that table of not the table, the graph of how the share price went, right, at specific times, and then you had the years here, and then you had the share price here, right? If the share price is here and then the company bought back shares, right? So that means that there's less shares in the market. That means the people who do have that shares, say for example, that company is Nike, and then now a lot of people want Nike shares, but there's not a lot of Nike shares in the market. What does this make? It increases the price of the share, right? This is basic economics. If you ever decide to take economics, or you ever did, this you should know, right? So, yeah, out of the theory to the practical now. So we're going to look at the first one. 230,000 new shares was issued on 1st of December 2022 at 5 rand per share, right? So this side is the number of shares. This side is the value of the shares, the rand value, right? So they had already issued 2,500,000. We are going to add on that and say 230,000 there, right? Shares was issued at, and then you fill in the date there, 1 December 1/12 2022, at how much per share? At 5 rand per share, right? You're going to do a quick calculation there, and then you're going to get 1,150,000 50,000, right? That's your amount. Now, the share repurchased at per share, right? This paragraph here tells us that they repurchased the shares at 7 rand 10 cents, right? But then what we always remember about share repurchase is that it's divided into two parts. Repurchase. A share repurchase is divided into two parts. It's divided into the expense that comes from the retained earnings, and then the part that we pay out as cash, bank, right? Usually it's bank, but in this case it was a loan that they took out, right? So the retained earnings would usually be the average price, right? And then the bank loan, the bank or the loan, that cash would be the surplus, right? So for example, if the repurchase was at 6 rand, 6 rand, and then the average price for us when doing our calculations there was 4 rand, then the surplus would be 2 rand, right? So in your ordinary share capital, you'd only record the 4 rand, because the 4 rand is how much is being taken out of the share capital. This 2 rand is going to come out of the bank or the loan, right? So a quick look at this one. They don't tell us what the average price is, but then we have all the figures there. So how do we find the average price? It's gonna be the rand value of shares, divided by the number of shares, right? So you're gonna say 10,850,470 plus 1,150,000. You're gonna add those together. I just did it on the side on a paper, and it's gonna give you 12,470, right? Divided by the number of shares. So that's going to be 2,500,000 plus 230,000. That is going to give you 2,730,000, right? Divide those together, you're going to get 4 rand 40. So what is this 4 rand 40? Just going to give you a 2-second pause. Hopefully you can answer this. The 4 rand 40 is our average price. Now, if you remember what I said, the average price is here, right? So remove this 4, 6, and 2. Average price is going to come here, 4 rand 40, right? 4 rand 40. Cool. How much did we repurchase it at? 7 rand 10 cents, right? So that means the surplus is going to be what? 7 rand 10 cents minus 4 rand 40. That is going to give us 2 rand 70 cents. Correct, right? Now, what we want to know is how much do we put in here? The rand amount, right? So they told us how many shares they bought. The number of shares does not change. No, sorry. Did I make a mistake? Oh, I didn't. The number of shares doesn't change. They bought 32,000 shares. They're going to have 32,000 shares. That doesn't change. The only thing that differs is that, okay, the date that they bought it, they bought it on the 1st of March 2023, right? Now, per share, they bought it at the average price. That's what we calculated there. Average price, which is 4 Rand 40, right? And then now we want to know that how much is that. So we're going to say 32,000 multiplied by 4 and 40, and I've already done this. It's going to give us 140,800, right? And then the other side, that is going to give us 86,400. So that is going to be 2 Rand 70 multiplied by 32,000. It's going to give us that. So this we're going to put here. So 140,800 subtracted there because we repurchased. They are no longer issued. Remember, here we want to know how much shares of the company are out to the market, in the public, in the JSE. Remember the JSE, right? So hence we subtracted there the same way we subtracted here, right? So in that question, if you look at the answering sheet, they say do not calculate the total there. So that is not a problem. But then now we know that 32,000 shares at the average price of 440, 140,800 came out there, right? And then they said that they took a loan for the difference since there was no cash in hand, which is going to be a loan of 86,400. And then they said that the loan was capitalized. That means the interest on the loan is going to be added back to the loan. That is interest capitalized. Interest is always added back to the loan. That's what they mean, interest capitalized. You can think of it as, in maths, we have simple interest and compound interest. Interest capitalized is compound interest. You just add back the interest, right? Now, for the second part, which is the first part, going back to the first question of interim dividends. This one I did not do on a piece of paper, so I'm going to ask for your help, right? Interim dividends. No, not interim. Final dividends. Final dividends, right? The interim, they've declared and paid it. It has nothing to do with us. It was recorded where it was recorded. Now, the final dividends. Remember, the final dividends comes out of the retained income of the company, right? The reason why I say retained earnings, okay, retained income, retained earnings, potato, income. The reason why I say that is because remember, what is in the retained earnings, right? In the retained earnings, we have our ordinary share capital, right? Ordinary share capital, and we have our income from the income statement, profit, right? So once you've compiled your income statement and you got that net profit at the bottom, where does that amount go? It goes to the retained earnings, retained income, right? The same place the retained income is the ordinary share capital, this figure, right? And that's where this amount comes from. So when you say that you're taking out this amount to pay to buy back shares, it comes from the retained earnings from this pot, right? So the reason why I said that dividends is going to come out of the profit, the retained earnings, sorry, is because of this income, this profit here, right? This is the profit that the company has made for the year, right? So think of it this way: you run a company, say you are selling, I'm trying to find a good product that you would sell. Okay, say you're selling iPhones, right? Selling iPhones, and um, along the way, you asked your family to invest in your company, right? And then they invested, they bought shares in your company, and then you're selling. You got to a point where you're making serious money now, right? Remember what I said, that the reason why we pay dividends, dividends, is because you have shareholders, right? These shareholders, they could have taken the money and put it in the bank and earned interest, but rather they took their money, bought shares, and what do you get for buying shares? You get dividends, right? So now in your company, you're selling iPhones, and then your family bought shares in your company. Now, say after COVID, 2023, 2024, you made a lot of money, right? And now you're going to say, I want to pay dividends. But then remember, you made a lot of money. What do we call that lot of money? We call it profit. That lot of money that you made from the sales, minus cost of sales, minus rent income, I mean, rent expense, and blah, 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 blah. At the end, that extra money you had is the profit. And from the profit, you pay dividends to say to your shareholders, look, we made a lot of money this year. We're saying thank you for having faith in us. We know during COVID, um, the shares were down. We were not selling so many iPhones and whatnots, but then you guys stayed with us. You didn't sell our shares. You supported us. You bought more shares when the company needed money to continue operating through COVID and whatnot. So now you're saying that here's the money, we have made profit, we've made a lot of income. We're gonna pay you guys a bit of dividends just to show you guys that we are a strong company, or whatever the reason is, right? Remember your assignment. There's a lot of reasons for that, right? So yeah, dividends always comes out of profit, right? Now, how do we calculate the final dividends? Final dividends, they did not specify when the final dividends is. So in that case, we're just gonna assume that it's at the end of the year, right? Remember back here, these are all transactions that had to do with the shares, right? Because at the end, here is the formula for dividends. Dividends is simply shares, issued shares, yeah, issued shares at that point, issued shares multiplied by dividends per share. And this is the acronym for it, but yeah, dividends per share, right? So in this case, the dividends here is going to be so to calculate the dividends, we're going to need the issued shares at that point. So we must know at the end of the year how much shares was out there that we paid dividends on. So we're going to say 2,500,000 plus 230,000 minus the 82,000. If I can just wing it here, I'm going to say 698,000. Yeah, yeah, that looks roughly. Just confirm this number. I just did it off by head, but yeah. So of my off by head number, that is probably wrong. 2,698,000 shares were issued at that point, at the end of the year, multiplied by dividends per share. Dividends per share was 10 cents per share, and that should give us dividends of another number that I'm just rounding off here. It's going to be 269,800. That is the final dividends paid, right? So yeah, it takes a long time to answer this question, but remember, once you know what you're supposed to do, it becomes easy, right? In the exam, maybe you can write this down to help you, but with enough practice, you'll know automatically this, because from the question you don't need to know this part, right? So you could have just skipped this. Could have literally, in a matter of minutes, written this and written that and that. Multiplied these two, gotten that answer, right? Written this, then said to yourself, okay, it's 710 cents. Let me do this whole calculation to find out what the average price is. Oh, I have the average price. Write it there, multiply that and that, you have your answer. Fine. Now they're looking for the dividends paid. Don't need all this. I'm writing an exam. I'm not explaining it. I'm not a tutor, right? Um, I know what the formula for dividends is. Issued share multiplied by dividends per share. Okay, do I have my issued shares? I don't. Let me calculate this quickly. Done. Dividends per share, put that in a calculator. That is my final amount. Where does this go? They say it was declared only. What does that mean to us? That we still have to pay it. That means it's an obligation, right? Something that we still have to do. Yeah, now I'm using university language here, obligation, sorry. But then, in other words, that is a liability for us, right? Now, we know that it's not just a liability, but it's a short term liability because we're going to pay it off as soon as the next year begins, right? So it's a short term liability. And what is the name for that liability? Shareholders for dividends. Blah, 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 blah. Yes. So that is it. Any questions? Just let me know. But yes.